Okay.
Welcome, welcome. Are we live?
Well, this is fun.
We're beaming
Let's
into
give it
your
a-
home.
Let's give it a minute here and make sure that
We're
oh,
IP
yeah,
tunneling. We're IP tunneling into your home system. Do you remember in Willy Wonka, Glenn, when Mike TV, the little kid, gets sent over the he gets shrunk? Do you remember Willy Wonka?
Yeah.
That's how I imagine it. I imagine we're little bits of data and we're being sent to all of the
I have photographs of when you were helping me with the original Vilppu Academy taking in the animation guilds. You got me started on that.
I'm not worthy. I mean, that's such a no-brainer, dude. Any millennial nephew could have done that.
But anyway, it's a sort of a continuation. We always talk is that
Sure.
I'm always trying to be sort of up on top of all of the latest techie stuff that I can use to take and be able to communicate better.
Yeah.
And it's all teaching. I'm a teacher.
Yeah. So, Glenn, have you thought of technology as just another opportunity to teach? Because we were talking earlier, you were doing printouts and Xerox and layered worksheets with registration and now iPad and now teaching online with Vilppu Academy and New Masters Academy.
Well, you know, as a teacher, you're always trying to take and explain. Well, one of the things that when you're talking about the Xerox thing, okay, when I first, I had already been, when I left Art Center College of Design, I taught there for like 13 years. And then I started my own school. And I would take and have students.
Too.
Yeah. And I would have students taking, and I would do a regular classroom. I taught, everything, days, nights, 7 days a week.
Glenn, I already know how you are. I don't think anything changed. You can draw all day long on one jelly sandwich and coffee.
Okay. You have to think that I started teaching in 1961. Okay, so I've been doing it. I tell students I've been doing this before your mother was born. Okay.
Oh my God, that is such a sick burn, dude.
And it's true. But
That's
anyway,
my goal.
but when I started
Before your mother was
teaching
born.
like that, I would take and go around the room and I would take and be diagrammed because it's even better to give. How did I develop the way I teach?
Yeah, I'm interested in that, Glenn. I'm also interested because so many of our students and people who are probably following this channel are young artists and they might have heard the legend of Vilppu, but I don't think they really understand how much you changed the way that drawing was being taught, not just in animation or at the fancy art schools, but you changed the way things are being taught in the world. And people have called you our version of Bridgman, for example. But I would like to get into a little bit of like the actual teaching content as well as your like philosophy about teaching.
Okay, where it began, when I first got hired, I was just like a 21-year-old. I walked into the director's office and I says, "What'd you have in mind?" This is Art
Center, right?
At Art Center,
Yeah.
I walked into the director's office and I said, "Well, what'd you have in mind?" And he said, "You're the teacher, go teach." Okay, I went to my teachers and they said, "Well, you were in class, teach." I had one instructor, Mary Vartikian. She was really good. And she said her first day of teaching, she talked for 8 hours and told them everything she knew, and it dawned on her, what am I doing next week?
That's still how I teach, Glenn. I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, that is one of the biggest differences in my teaching approach is that I'm systematic. So what I did...
So, yeah, that actually, Glenn, just to plant a flag there, when people compare you to Bridgman, one thing I always have to say is that, well, Bridgman didn't offer a process. Glenn actually figured out a process to teach. What Bridgman is teaching is just conceptualizations of Michelangelo kind of stuff, right?
Well, I went back. What I did is I said, okay, what's number one? What's number two? What's number three? and right down the line. And that's what the drawing manual is. Each chapter builds on this previous chapter, and that's how it developed.
How long did it take you to develop that system?
Well, in class, before I like making a book, in class, I actually had to plan it out because I had to figure out what am I doing for 12 weeks. Okay, because I wanted it to take. It's changed, over what 60 years of teaching. It's changed.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, I keep learning. I'm learning all the time.
Yeah.
And as it developed, okay, I tell people that most students today do not understand that when I say it all the time, is that everything I learned was studying composition. Okay, so when you're studying, whether it's a Pontormo or Michelangelo or Raphael, whoever, you have to draw.
Yeah.
And in drawing it, when you're drawing compositions, you're not copying individual figures. You're sort of diagramming the action and how the figures relate.
Do you think that master studies, because I know Harry Carmian and Lorser would do that, but do you think that using and new masters, this is something obviously that we did right from the beginning, and using the old masters in particular to understand art theory and to communicate that to students, was that common when you were a student, or was that something that only a group of artists were kind of doing?
Now, in class, Feidelson and Carmine, now those are the only two guys. The other people, other illustrations or classes, the instructors didn't draw.
Oh, they didn't demonstrate in the classroom.
The only ones that did, there was one guy who demonstrated the painting.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but not a figure painting class. He was demonstrating in an illustration class how to work with gouache. That's the only one that actually demonstrated.
So your teachers, for the most part, they weren't demonstrating. They weren't talking about the old masters. And were there any other differences in terms of how you were approaching teaching at that time versus just,
No, I pretty much.
Teachers?
Well, I'll give you an idea. I started out teaching when I was 21 years old, maybe 22. Okay,
Yeah.
Most of the students I had in class were the best people from all over the country. Okay.
Of course.
And most of them were older than I was.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. You're like a little shit trying to tell them how to draw.
Yeah. So I was so nervous. I was terrified. I had so many canker sores in my mouth, I could hardly talk. So what I would do is I just set up a bunch of benches up there and piled up. And I said, okay, to get started, let's draw this.
Wow.
And so then I would sit down and start drawing. Once I started drawing, then they could see that I had something to teach them.
Yeah. So, okay, that makes sense. Like you had to prove yourself to your students. And so the way to do that is the same way you've been doing it your entire life, is with drawing.
Absolutely. That's the only way that you take and you draw. You have to show, and that's I always sort of joke, is my mouth is attached to my pencil.
Yeah, yeah.
And I demonstrate, I go through it. Well, when you're demonstrating, you're starting a drawing, you have to explain, well, how did you do that? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And so that's the whole process is why you're going through step by step by step. So when I left Art Center and I had my own school, I go around the room to sit down and I would just say, we're talking about the lay-in, or we're taking dealings, round forms. Well, I would be doing the same diagram over and over. And I thought, no, this is silly. So I would take and did some drawings, and I'd go down to the corner liquor store and we'd run through the Xerox machine, and I'd make up 20 copies.
Would you come back with
would
you come back with a brown bag?
Well, practically, So anyway, so that was an evolved.
But those were like worksheets, or they were like what? Do you have something to show us? I think you brought some.
Okay, the students that I had were, I was doing a better job than Art Center because I had what I always said that okay, all day drawing, painting, all day.
When you started your own private school, you mean?
Well, when I had my own school,
Yeah.
we didn't have, like, I had a figure class, but I advertised the thing is only drawing and painting all day, every day.
That's cool. I would have been there.
Yeah, we had and that's why I had a lot of people who took and were already doing things. I had people, professionals, I had all kinds of people coming in there that they weren't getting that in school, because at that time, there was when I was a student, when I left Art Center, and part of the reason I left, is that they were saying, you don't need to draw anymore.
Yeah.
That's passé.
It's so funny that so many students now don't realize that in the 60s and 70s and earlier, the contemporary abstract modern art movement was so dominant across the world in education, not some places like Russia and stuff, but it was so dominant that just the idea that we should be learning how to draw, and we should be learning how to paint, and we should keep plaster casts in the studio, and we should even study anatomy. Like when you were doing anatomy studies, none of your contemporaries were doing that, right?
Yeah, no, I was totally opposite of everybody.
Which is funny because right now, anatomy, construction, gesture, those are like dominant, sticky memes. There are these ideas that people pass around the internet. But when you were first starting, you were really a pioneer in that. Other teachers were not teaching that. It was very graphic. It was very flat. Nobody was studying anatomy. This is before the whole VizDev Art Center.
Well, you know, I can't say that I was the only one, because there were people in Europe, some of the old academy people, they were doing that, but they didn't have the audience or the place.
Of course.
That was and being in Los Angeles, in the film industry, you know, the students, in many ways and actually when I started working at Disney, teaching there, the reason that they knew who I was because of my students, because they could draw, they could construct, and they could do things from their imagination.
So can you talk a little bit about that, Glenn? Because that comes up now, because at New Masters Academy, for example, you are, for example, it's the only thing like that, but you are integrated with other instructors into the track system, as you know. And sometimes people ask, what are the differences between Glenn's method and, let's say, an illustration method or more of an entertainment drawing method? And one thing I always tell students is that Glenn's method works from imagination. Most of those other methods, they don't work as well from imagination. Can you talk about why that was important to animators and why that was important to you?
Well, what I talk about, Joshua, is that in our mind, we have absolutely no rules.
No rules, just tools.
Yeah, just no rules, just tools. And the trick is to get it out of your head, out on the paper. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't start with, if you're going to work in, like my own paintings, my own drawings, I don't use models.
Yeah.
Okay, but that comes from studying not animation, but studying old masters and doing that. And so, like when when I started, people say, well, all this stuff comes from animation. I was teaching and painting for 20 years before I got in animation.
Yeah, Glenn, when no one, I've never heard anybody criticize your teaching or your drawing method, even though the internet is full of people who are, talking shit. But the only thing I've heard when somebody is trying to contain you is they say, oh, Glenn's amazing, but he's more of an animation guy. And I always tell them, I'm like, he's really a traditional fine artist guy. You didn't get into animation until your 40s, and you started at a little company called Disney. Can you talk about how somebody in their 40s who has no interest in animation just walks into Disney and works on feature films? Like, the Fox and the Hound and the Black Cauldron and all these things? How did that happen?
Okay. In my own school, I had a lot of people who wanted to work at Disney. Okay, but to take, and they had to have a portfolio, a drawing portfolio to do that. So Disney was getting a lot of my students hired because they could draw.
Yeah.
And so when I started at Disney, I didn't, like I said, I didn't know anything about animation. In fact, when they hired me, the first thing I did is went to a bookstore and bought a book on Disney because I didn't know what the hell they were talking about.
That's so funny. That's so funny.
But they had, right away, one of the first things, besides, okay, on my own work, I would draw and paint from imagination. Mm-hmm. That's what you do in the animation industry.
So do you think that the animators found you because your method works from imagination and they work from imagination?
Yeah.
Or were you targeting them somehow?
In fact, in the there's one of the guys who was Disney had their own school. They called it Disney University at one time. Mm-hmm. Okay, and in that I taught the figure drawing class. Walt Stanfield taught sort of like a gesture, caricature class. Eric Larson.
Walt Stanfield, that's Drawn to Life. You're in that book, right?
Yeah, there's 2 books of that were put out after he died, but these were handouts that he did that were turned into a book. Well, wow. they put some of my drawings into Walt's book because of the construction. What my drawing has become the standard in animation. My drawing doesn't come from animation. More of the animation drawing comes from me.
That's really hard to communicate to a bunch of young students because you've taught over 70,000, we tried to calculate it once, millions if you count like YouTube, which we don't, but you've taught like 70,000 students, you've taught generations of leaders, you've taught a lot of, like Drew Struzan is a Vilppu student, Ron Husband, so many artists, Richard McDonald, so a lot of like the leaders in art were former Vilppu students, and so your teaching has permeated the art culture over the years.
I tell you, a few years ago, I taught a class in London, but I had in the class were some animators who worked in Disney films and what have you, and they were local UK people, and it was an animal drawing class, go to the zoo and what have you. And one of the things that the guys comment, he says the first time ever they've taken and had a class where somebody talked about the structure.
Yeah. So it was more graphic?
No, none of it was the idea. And this is Renaissance drawing. You build 3D, we talk of Cambiasso, we talk of everybody, Rubens. I mean, if people wanted to figure out how did Vilppu get to where he is, look at Rubens. Yeah. Look at Rubens' drawings.
So you see yourself as just being somebody who reconnected with traditional drawing after some of the modern art movements that got people away from that. And that traditional drawing, as you interpret it, is so useful that it just became like a wildfire in entertainment art and in animation. And it was just good information, basically, that you were relating. Yeah. Is that how you think of it?
Well, the Renaissance art, we talk about Michelangelo, Raphael, whoever, they were businessmen. They didn't do things on speculation. This is the practical way. Everything started from imagination. And so when you're starting from imagination, what's number one? The composition. Mm-hmm. And so when you're working with the composition, you're designing figures to go in a composition that work together.
Yeah.
Okay. Composition, Renaissance art is storytelling.
So did you study their compositional sketches in order to unlock that, or were you looking at the final artwork?
Both. I did very little of what today they call master studies, of copying an old master drawing. I did very, very little of that.
So
I
you were
did.
trying to get to the essence of what they were doing, not so much the particular strokes or whatever it is.
The style is irrelevant. I mean, people, that's what I always have to people say. If you say,
Yeah.
well, Vilppu method. It's not my method. It's just an incredibly practical way to work.
Yeah.
And it's logical, and that's why I think it captures so many people's minds.
Yeah.
Is that it's, and I say this drawing is just thinking. That's all it is. It's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you taking and how you think, the process. It's not copying something, and that's the process. Mm-hmm. And it's how you describe form. Now that today, in our contemporary art world today, that's the biggest difference. Is that, and I've had people who come in and take a class from me, and one of them, I remember this one guy, he was pretty good. He comes in and says, "Oh, you're a form drawer." And I said, "Well, yeah, well, of course. What else do you do?"
Yeah. What else? Yeah. That's interesting.
And so rather than tone, so it's not, I don't do, of course I use tone, I have a modeling tone, I do all that stuff, I do realistic drawing, but it's not copying, it's taking and organizing it. And that's, I was just rereading Rudolf Arnheim's Art and Visual Perception. Okay, one of the comments he makes in there, and he talks about it, it was the latest edition of 72, I think. And he says, well, today it's sort of like people aren't taking and studying anatomy. Okay, but the biggest difference, and he brings out the point, to draw the figure, to draw something, if you don't know the form underneath, it's incredibly difficult to draw.
Yeah.
And that's where I originally started studying anatomy, because I came to a point, because I had gone to school, I was teaching, I had already been teaching for 13, 14 years. When I started my own school, I really started to study anatomy because I saw the limitation. Mm-hmm. My drawing was limited because I didn't know the forms that I was drawing. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't be expressive, I couldn't draw from imagination, I couldn't do the things I needed to do for me without understanding
Glenn,
anatomy.
I think you brought one of your first anatomy studies here. Maybe it's a good time. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. Okay. Want to show how I learned anatomy. I had to teach myself. Okay. I took, and what I did, this is the thing. See, this is just a Xerox. I'm trying to think whose book this was out of.
That's Paul Richet.
Yeah, I did this, just one example here, but I took and Xeroxed this down at the local liquor store.
Yeah.
And then I'd put tissues over it. And I would take and add layer upon layer of taking layer upon layer of anatomy. And I did it through every angle of the bones. I did it here, I'm just showing the leg, but I did it through the whole figure.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that part of the thing was that to take and really learn something, you have to be really repetitive. Mm-hmm. You have to really do it again and again. So the best way to do that is teach it.
Yeah.
So I figured if I can stay 1 week ahead of the student, I'm going to have to really take and study.
Yeah.
And then the next time I do it, it'll be a little bit better. And maybe by the 10th time, I'll actually remember the names.
That's funny. That's so funny. You gave me that advice like 10 years ago. I don't know if you remember that. You gave me the advice to start teaching, and I took your advice on that, and you were right.
Yeah, that's the best way to learn is to explain to somebody else.
Yeah.
And the way my teachers, they would sit down and they would draw.
Yeah.
Okay, well, two of my main teachers anyway. They
Which
would-
is not
Harry and Lorcy.
common.
What?
Yeah, most drawing classes, even today, most drawing classes, ateliers, art schools, for the most part, the teacher doesn't demonstrate. That's still unusual for them to draw every day and put their
Well,
reputation on the line.
I think a lot of people don't demonstrate because they don't want to make mistakes.
That's one way.
I think the student learns as much from me making a mistake as they learn
Yeah.
from him making a mistake.
Well, Glenn, on that point, because you were my first art mentor and the most influential in my life. I think a lot of people know that. But one thing I learned from you is that there's something that I call performative drawing. So you have the long stick and the charcoal, or it's not fake, let's say, but it's basically prepared in advance, and the teacher is not really taking any risk. One thing I've noticed about you is not only do you constantly draw, putting your reputation on the line in front of the camera, in front of the student, but your actual book, the Vilppu Drawing Manual, which I think in 2 minutes here we should start opening, those are actual classroom drawings. They're not tracings. They're not things you did in Photoshop. And all the illustrations I see in other how to draw books, besides like Bridgman and a few older ones, they are there's no room for a mistake. They are prepared. They're either using photographs or 3D models. I mean, Loomis was using photographs in his book. And I just want to ask you, is that just a practical thing, or do you believe it's important to really show real drawings, not calculated illustrations?
Okay, when you think of the drawing manual, and the fact that most of those drawings are classroom drawings. So
That's crazy.
Part of the thing, when I started doing the book, I was going through my sketchbooks and piles of papers and saying, what drawings do I have that actually demonstrate what I'm talking about? And these were drawings that were done usually in class.
You have tens of thousands of these drawings, to be clear, in case people don't know. You have standing safes completely full of drawings. Like, I've never seen more drawings from anybody other than you.
Well, in fact, there's no room in that thing. I've got desks just piling up.
It's a fire hazard.
It's crazy. I don't know whatever happened. Sometimes I think if the house had an earthquake, all the books that we have, I have an incredible library.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I use it. They're tatters. I'm taking and I go over things again and again and again and again. But the evolution, like this. See, these were a series of lessons that I created. Now, I used to hang these things out. Well, actually, these weren't the handouts. I was actually, when the computer first started.
Yeah.
I started on a computer with an Amiga 2000.
Wow.
Most people don't even know about
Glenn,
those things.
Yeah,
I knew absolutely nothing about
down.
computers. I said, this is where it's going. You better learn it. And so I would take and go through these things, and these were taking in. You can see this is diagramming composition. Well, if you look at the drawings, the way that I'm doing these compositional drawings.
Upside down. You're upside down.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. I'm looking
we got a
at
camera there, Glenn.
Yeah, if you look at these drawings, the way the drawings are done, that's when you're talking about how does one line lead to another line and all the multiple lines underneath.
Yeah.
That's exactly, and then going through all of these different steps to take and come up with a composition. Now here, this is another lesson, but taking and working from the model, the construction. But this actually evolves from drawing this.
Wow.
And if you look at, instead of looking at Michelangelo and looking and copying one of the really fancy drawings, the thing is to look at the unfinished drawings. Look at how did they draw? How did they think? Mm-hmm. And it's the thinking the famous Roman historian Livy.
Yeah.
He made the comment. He says, as you get more sophisticated in your appreciation of art, you will learn to enjoy the unfinished works of the artist so that you can see the thinking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what it is.
And
But
that's the
don't-
same logic. That's the same logic as looking at the students of the masters who are not as good as the master, because the illusion is not as strong, and you can kind of see how it was done, like with
Exactly.
Rubens and Peniels, for example, right?
Exactly. And that's how you tell the difference between the master and the students when they're looking at old master drawings, that they can say the sense of authority, that they can put it down, the knowledge. And that makes a difference. So these things I would take, and this is part of
Yeah.
the thing. I used to, now here's when we're talking about taking, and so these drawings here, these were drawings that I did for myself first.
Yeah. Can you show
And
it to the
then-
camera, Glenn? Can you show it to
Okay.
the top camera?
When I did these drawings,
Yeah.
these were in a sketchbook
It's
that were
upside
taking.
down. Just have it face you.
Oh, turn me.
You are pointing.
Okay. When these drawings right here, those were probably done lying in bed, trying to figure out anatomy with a skeleton alongside the bed,
Uh,
and taking and drawing, and then I would take and go. Then I did some elaborate stuff with it. So,
Yeah.
but these were anatomical notes then that I would give to the students. I used to take and print these out on a Epson printer. I ran through so many Epson printers,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
I would take each week. I would take and go through and print up. Like I think this is probably the original. This is 2011.
Yeah.
Okay, I would go to the printers every week
Yeah.
and print out 50 or 60 copies of each page, or do them. I even was doing it on my own thing, but I kept burned through so many printers. And it was better to go down to the print shop and have them run off 50 copies, and then I would hand those out.
Yeah.
That,
Well, Glenn,
that
I just wanna-
evolved into the manual.
I wanted to comment because one thing when you were just showing those drawings that I always admired about your anatomical studies, which goes back to Leonardo and Vesalius and Albinus, is that you're not turning it into a mechanical, architectural, viz-devy thing. They look natural, they have gesture, they're characteristic, and it's more like real anatomy to me. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's because it is. I'm not sitting. Originally, it wasn't meant to take and actually those drawings that I was doing them. They weren't meant for a book.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
and this is where one of the things that even today, and goes back to. Like I said, I was reading the art and visual perception thing again recently, and one of the comments in this is why drawing is still required for even like an anatomical illustrator who has the photograph.
Yeah.
The photograph is not, the photograph lies.
Yeah.
And you have to take and clarify it, and if you don't, you have to have a means, and it's just a matter of describing form. It's
It's just funny because that's how contemporary anatomy began. Leonardo was the first. Before that, they were using descriptions from antiquity, like written descriptions. The idea of actually cutting open the body, learning the forms, that's not just the history of like anatomy, but artists, it was us. It was artists that were doing that work. And the fact that you are doing it more in that traditional sense sort of brings us back to where anatomy started. And that's really what I like. But you know what? That is what is so rare, because every other teacher or book, I mean, maybe Elliot Goldfinger and a few, like Elliot Goldfinger was a mentor of mine as well. But a lot of those artists, they turn it into this squarey, boxy kind of a thinking. What do you think about that really like mechanical, viz-devy approach to anatomy? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think it's better to do it your way?
They look dead. They look like engineering designs. I mean, if you're going to do robotics and you're not a drawer, maybe they probably become very useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for drawing, it's in reality, the anatomy is only important if you don't know it.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. And it's like perspective. If you don't know perspective, it's really important.
Well,
but once you know it.
Yeah, nowadays, most students that we get that are younger, they are big on perspective and they're big on 3D thinking, but not so much on gesture and sketching and drawing from imagination. Do you have advice for people who are learning perspective? They want to make up worlds and make up characters and make up figures. Is perspective really the key, or is it more the traditional drawing that you teach?
No, working in the studios or my own things, I never start with perspective. First, I start with the imagery that I want, and then I apply perspective as needed. And again, that's pretty traditional. You take and you use it as you need it. It's a tool. It's like most things, it's a tool. And people say, well, like I said, the Vilppu system. It's like, it's not my system. I'm just a repackaging agent, you might say.
Well, but the stuff you're repackaging is better than the stuff other people are repackaging.
Well, I have fun at it. I have worked like crazy to do it better and better and better. But the idea that, and this is where going right back to what is probably the biggest thing that people have a hard time with, is the gesture.
Yeah.
Okay, when you were talking about when I say, well, okay, what's number one?
Yeah.
Where do you start? It's the emotional content that you're taking and trying to create. And it's the feeling. It's all about the feeling. Okay, if you're looking at 2D flat shapes, you're looking at the wrong thing. You're not,
so you don't think there's an easy way to start a scene with perspective and get that composition and feeling into it?
Well, what if the angle isn't what really you want?
Yeah.
Then you have to start over.
Yeah.
And that's where the first thing I do, and even going out landscape painting or sketch, do a thumbnail, or do 2 or 3 thumbnails. Because that's like taking a camera. You don't know what it's going to really look like until you get the thing down. And once you do that first thing, you might say, well, that's not a very good thing. Let's do another one. And professionally, you do many, many thumbnails to get started.
Yeah, and so you've worked in feature animation, you've worked in comics, you've done illustration, fine art. You started as a painter. You had been painting for 40 years. Still are, before you even got involved in animation at all. So as somebody who's sort of done so many different types of drawing, how much of that is like drawing foundations, and how much of it is animation specific, comic specific, if you were to break it down?
Animation has practically it sharpened what animation did. It sharpened my drawing to what was needed in animation. My drawing doesn't come from animation, and it's the idea of being able to construct a figure. Well, these things here I was showing you.
Yeah.
Glenn, I was doing this stuff
like that.
Doing this stuff before animation.
Yeah.
This is let's see what year. This one's after. Okay, 2004.
But those drawings from the 70s that you were doing in those little worksheets where you're showing the different layers of construction, that was really influential in how people taught after you. And I think that this idea that there are these layers and you can do it systematically, that's very much like something that you contributed. But specifically, I want to ask you about the rhythmical lines, because I get this question a lot, which is, where did Glenn get those famous Vilppu rhythmical gesture lines that we all have seen before? Where did those come from?
Well, people are saying, is that for animation? No. I probably brought it more to animation drawing than anything. But look at the drawings of Parmigianino.
Yeah.
Look at these are compositional lines.
Yeah.
And the idea when you're talking about making the eye move, you have to move one line to the next line to the next line. You make your eye move through a picture. It's kinetics.
Now, does an action line do that too, or just one long curvy line?
No, an action line has nothing to do with gesture. And this is where people get confused. The line of action is actually a generalization of a composition. The demonstration I make a lot of times is that if you have a line of action, that shows you what the whole big figure is doing. But the figure within that, I can draw on the back of this and show you.
Sure.
Okay.
Kel, can we go to a top-down cam?
Oh, this is paper. I'll draw on the top of a book box.
Just gonna draw on an antique there.
Here, look at it. I haven't opened. No, it's not going to go through, I don't think. Okay, now the idea is that if you have a figure, this is white.
Yeah. Can you draw big, Glenn?
I'll use my fountain pen here. Okay. If you have a figure, doing something like that, okay? Now, right there, you can see the action, okay? Okay. Now, the line of action would be that.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the gesture.
It's almost like a placement thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So the gesture here would be,
Yeah.
okay, the head is taking and tilted and going in this direction. The shoulder maybe on the other side is going up. The pelvis, the rib cage is turned. We got the thoracic arch. The pelvis is maybe going this way. The leg is coming out towards us. So you can see what I'm doing is I'm diagramming what the action is. And I'm doing it three-dimensionally. So the three-dimensional construction then is just clarifying what the action is. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a step. So like with Cambiasso, and Albert Dürer was a big influence on everybody.
Sure. Piero della Francesca.
Well, you had to take and use corners to take and do perspective. A corner is a box.
Yeah.
That's just practical. Okay, where are the corners? Well, corners of the 10th rib. You got the corners of the pelvis. That's just pragmatic.
But you don't start drawings with boxes. You put boxes into your gestures as you work, right?
Yeah, I don't, in a sense, I don't put boxes into the figure. I use the box to clarify the action that is created. The box is defined by the anatomy.
That's different than how a lot of people are using it, where they use a box to just contain everything. You're using the box logic as part of the drawing process.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's week 3 of the Vilppu Drawing Manual.
Yeah. You've only been doing it that way for what, half a century. Glenn, I'm just looking at the time right now. I know this is obviously fascinating. A lot of people have asked lots of questions and they want to hear more, but I think it would be cool if we could do the unboxing now and then
okay, let's take a look here.
Some of these for
ta-da! I've been waiting for this. You know, the insides, I know that, but the whole thing in this, because as everything you do, Joshua, it's sort of over the top, technically perfect.
Thanks.
It's very contrary to the way I do things. If I can get it out fast and get it out there, it's the information. Whoa!
It's easier to do it for something you believe in.
Pretty cool. Hey, I know that drawing.
Yeah. Let's go to the top-down cam.
You know, this drawing here, this drawing that you're seeing on the thing here, I did that drawing sitting in Santorini, Greece.
Baller.
And actually, I had some reference material with me, and we were there. I was teaching, and that's where I did that drawing. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, how we gotta have some. Let's see. I got a knife here. Open up.
I think we should switch to the top-down camera for this part.
Okay,
We are on the stream.
Oh, we are? Okay, great.
Okay, here. Let me. I'm a Finn. I always carry a knife. Yeah, we did the DNA thing. It turns out I'm 99.6% some full-blooded Finn. See me.
Oh, wow.
No, me and the Laplanders were all. No, I got to get this thing open.
Well, you're probably the most influential Finnish person to art.
Oh, here we go. I don't want to damage the material here.
So just so everybody knows, Glenn is going to be signing some of these books today. So we're going to be selling some signed copies after we do this unboxing.
And some people have been asking about a giveaway. If we have any information on something special during the stream.
I have an idea, but let me pitch that idea to Glenn once we start signing.
Yeah. See, this is a compositional sketch. Look, see, the eye moves you through here to here. These are lines that go over the surface to describe the thing in space. These are all tools. That's a tool. See, the idea, everything, practical. See, when you look at this stuff,
Yeah, I mean, to me, those lines, Glenn, are iconic Vilppu. You know, when I see these lines, I'm not thinking of Tintoretto. I'm not thinking of Harry Carmine. I'm not thinking of anybody but Vilppu when I see those lines.
Well, it's because, maybe you might say that there's where animation did influence a little bit. Because when you're taking and doing a drawing,
yeah,
and you're coming through, rather than copying something, you are actually animating the eye to move from one point to the next to the next. It's not a straight line like that. That's just a wiggly line. There's no movement.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're talking about creating life, you want to take and create movement.
Yeah.
And you go over the surface of the form, you go around the form. That's just a matter of being practical to describe what something is doing.
Yeah.
See, you're just showing direction. That's a tool. So then if you come in and you clarify the volume, that's just a simple sphere. If you can draw a snowman, you can do that.
Yeah, simple for Glenn.
And that's all it is. It's just going over, containing it. Well, what probably the hardest thing is I don't have any fear in doing it.
We can see that.
There's no care. I don't care if I make a mistake or not because it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Mistakes
also, Glenn,
don't.
when you're at a level of mastery, and I've said this before, I think you're the best draftsman in the world. When you're at this level of mastery, even your mistakes they're usually too advanced for us to even see them, that they're happening.
Well, I've worked damn hard at it. I still am. And I've started doing stuff on the iPad. I'm having so much fun drawing on the iPad. You know, I've been doing stuff on the Friday sessions that we've been having, using the iPad and using my fingers and pushing the stuff around and taking, and it is just a gas. Well,
that's where we all want to get, Glenn. We want to get as good as you, where we can just have fun and draw whatever from imagination, from reference. I think this is what so many students want to be able to do, is what you're doing right now.
It's you do it, you get there by one, no fear.
Yeah.
You put down the lines, there's no such things as mistakes.
Yeah.
It's not mistakes, you're exploring. You're taking and searching for something. And so as you're doing it, you're taking and constantly just trying to discover something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Leonardo says that too, right? He talks about discovering the outlines, right?
Yeah, like what I do is I'm drawing it. Okay, something I did on Friday was I started out with a figure from imagination, and all of a sudden I realized, well, I don't like that arm. I don't like which way it goes.
Yeah.
I can move it. I change it,
Sure.
and you just push it around. It doesn't matter because the important.
Well, Glenn,
the important part.
I think that's a Vilppuism. Don't copy the model, analyze. I think that is almost like common knowledge now, but I think a lot of that was you hammering it for decades and tens of thousands of students. Don't copy, don't copy, don't copy.
You know, I have a big group of people out there who copy it, and I'm doing very hard at countering it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the war's been won, my friend. I think we won the war.
Hey, somebody's going to get.
Yeah. Why don't we do this,
there you go.
Glenn? Glenn, why don't we do this? Why don't we just randomly choose 5 of the books you're going to sign, and then in those 5 books you do a little drawing, because this is a short run. It's already going to be valuable. The signed ones are going to be more valuable. The drawing ones are even more valuable.
Okay, here, I noticed you got stack here that are already opened.
Glenn, can you take off the jacket and show the, 'cause we did a custom color and we did this cloth.
Okay, I guess where I was doing the drawing on the inside cover, that's good.
Yeah, let's take off the jacket. I want to show people what we did
Oh,
here. So
right.
this is a custom die that was inspired by your sanguine pencils that you like to use. So this is a custom color. And then we've got a silver embossed little Vilppu.
That's really nice. Hey, you could put a piece of paper and do a rubbing on that.
Yeah, you could, huh?
This is cool.
So we went completely all out.
Okay.
This is supposed to be like museum catalog quality.
Hey, I guess this is a good a place as any to sign them, huh?
Sure, I think so.
Well, let me take and, I do a lot of head drawing. And so let's just take it even do something here. And the thing that I try to get across is people to take and be able to give expression to what they're doing. This is actually sort of funny because I'm always telling people, don't draw on black paper.
That's funny. Even the black paper, that's real black paper, which is a lot of times they'll just use ink to make it black. So we actually are using black.
See, here, what I'm doing here, everything I do, and I'm constantly telling people that I'm always thinking anatomy. So I'm thinking, where's the cheekbones? Where is this thing going? It's sort of a negative image here now. And so you think, where's the corner of the jaw? Which way is the neck taking and turning? You work going around the surface. Think of where the clavicle. How does the clavicle go? Where we feel the trapezius coming down. And, okay, put an ear. Where's the ear? The angle of the corner of the eye. Socket here. The globule. That's another thing. That's a piece of anatomy practically nobody talks about.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking where the massive muscles come down, the hyoid bone underneath, thyroid cartilage, sternocleidomastoid. See, I tell people that they should draw. When they draw, they take and do things from, or call out the muscles as you're doing it.
Oh, so talk to yourself as you draw?
Constantly taking in, That's why I say that they should take in their mind, even out loud. I've done this, I do this in class where I have students take turns telling each other how to draw. Explain it. Explain what
Yeah.
you're doing. And it
What do you-
really
Glenn,
is
what do
a
you- what do you
way
think of that?
to learn.
What do you think of the weight of the book? What do you think of the feel of the book? It's the first time you've held it. It's the first time you've touched it. Do you have any impressions on the quality, or just how do you feel about it?
Pretty nice. I'm looking at the reproductions. It's pretty good. I mean, they're really, really clear. One of the things that, like, okay, the page that I've got open here,
Yeah.
this was the page, this drawing was done on a computer.
Sure.
These are iPad drawings. The ones on the left here, those are drawing from imagination. To take and see, to realize that when you look at a lot of my drawings from imagination, you cannot tell the difference between what I do in imagination.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
now this,
in a
this,
sense,
I
you're
just,
always drawing from imagination,
yeah, just
aren't you?
I'm looking at this page here, 98. Here's where, and this is, I use all of these things. This is an important point,
Yeah.
is that here you can see I'm talking they're using my quote rhythm idea, but then here I'm using sort of a box type form. Well, that's Rubens. Just a shape like that. And here, this is copying just the contour. Well, those are standard ways that people work.
Yeah.
Well, and so the idea is that it's not wrong, it's what's the results that you want. And so I'm doing these. You look at these drawings here. Now, these are all more like a la Rubens.
Yeah.
See,
You're
they
referring to
think-
Rubens' compositional sketches, right? His imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once he starts something like that, then immediately he goes into the 3D, he starts building
Yeah.
it up, and the
Well,
anatomy.
Rubens
here,
Rubens
see
talks
these-
about the three basic forms. Can you talk a little bit about those three forms where you can build anything out of them?
Spheres, boxes, cylinders.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
Spheres, boxes, and cylinders.
Sure.
And so, like, whether it's anatomical forms or like these are cartoony.
Yeah.
Well, it's going through the essence of something. There's a great quote. These really are reproductions are really nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
went all out. You know, like this was not about just. I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about this, Glenn, because you guys have been self-publishing the Vilppu Drawing Manual since the 90s. Am I right?
You're right.
So
I've been doing. I started. Let's see. Well, this is the some of the early. I started out taking and doing it.
oh, yeah.
Vilppu Drawing Manual. This one here is 97. I started actually. Notice it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's still the same stuff. And
Yeah, the rest of the drawing community came closer to you, but you've pretty much been there.
yeah, and it's but I'm not. The idea is if you take and the skills, like I'm just looking at what I'm preparing here, like it's not my invention. Like page 103 here on this thing, okay. I'm showing the difference between tangencies. Okay, there's a whole section on form by Arnheim where it's explaining why tangencies don't work. But just from a psychological point of view.
Yeah.
And so all of this stuff. Yeah, even proportions and measuring. This
Yeah.
is
A lot of people are asking
this is one
specifically-
area. Well, let's look at the manual itself.
People
Yeah.
want to know what the updates. What is new about the new edition?
Okay.
And people are scrambling to understand what you meant about the giveaway of the 5 drawings.
Okay,
They
can I,
keep
Glenn?
asking.
Yeah, just let me explain real quick because we're getting some questions. So the Vilppu Drawing Manual is now on sale, and it's a very short run. So we only did 2,000 of these books, right? That's a real short run compared to the amount of interest we have. So for some of these books, Glenn is going to sign them right now. That's what he's doing. He's going to sign some of these, and you can choose them in checkout if you want a signed copy. And I just had this silly idea that Glenn can actually draw a little bit in 5 of them randomly. So you just might, if you purchase the book, you just might randomly get one of these ones that Glenn right now is sort of doodling in. Of course, the doodle for Glenn is a masterpiece for us. And that's what it is. So this is the Vilppu Drawing Manual. This is the only legitimate copy of the drawing manual that is in production. There is plagiarism. There's sort of an ongoing legal thing. Some people, even on Amazon, are home printing these things and trying to, but this is the only legit copy other than the originals, which I think on eBay, those were going for like $200 or $300 for a while because the self-published version that Glenn and Eleanor were not printing for a while. So there's definitely been a demand for, I think, almost over a year to bring the manual back. So this is a new edition of Glenn's drawing manual. It's been copy edited, 6 rounds of copy editing, new forward, some image changes and adjustments, table of contents, brand new design. It's the first time this has been available in a hardbound version. So this is not a version that's going to come apart. This is a version you can give your grandkids if they like art. So it's really like a premium museum catalog quality version, and it's been updated. But essentially, this is the drawing manual. You know, this is the same basic content as the drawing manual that you might have purchased 30 years ago.
Yeah, this is actually probably the best version. Best version I've done. Well, the clarity, I have to admit, the clarity of the printing is really pretty darn nice.
It was,
And
yeah.
especially when you start getting down into some of the ink and wash line drawings. Those are extraordinary. And
Well, this is the gold standard figure drawing book. It's also more than a figure drawing book. This is really a how to draw anything book. So I think that, yeah, go ahead.
I don't draw any different if I'm drawing animals or I'm drawing a tree.
Sure.
It's just thinking. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And you develop your well, it's using the tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I do.
Yeah.
I'm really just teaching tools.
Mm-hmm.
And probably the most important thing is that it's a systematic approach to doing
Yeah.
things. And that's my biggest thing as a teacher. I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
you know, and to be systematic, and I think that's probably the biggest thing
Oh, yeah.
that I have been, where the influence comes from, because it's clear, it's
Yeah.
direct, and it shows you how to do it.
Well, it's also not taking any shortcuts. So this is the most masterful drawing approach being taught. So it's not watered down or simplified. You didn't make it easy to teach it, but you
No.
did make it systematic. that makes a difference.
It's not, I'm not watering it down. And
Yeah.
in my critiquing people's work, I'm not subtle.
Yeah. I learned this.
I mean, I say it, I'm not bashing people. I just
No,
say,
no.
hey, it doesn't work. This is what you need to do. And this is where you need to go.
Yeah.
And I show it, and I draw.
Yeah.
And
Well-
that's how you get there.
So real quick, Glenn, because people were asking what's different about this edition. One thing is that there's actually a digital bonus content when you buy this book. So you get 150 reference photos to draw from that Glenn has curated. And then you also get access to the video version of this course that we did for New Masters Academy. So Glenn, can you talk a little bit about how the New Masters Academy version of this, how it ties into the book? Is it the same material basically, but in video form, or is it different?
The difference is the crit. Okay, that's the difference. Other than that, it's pretty much basically the same thing.
Yeah.
And I like the difference between what New Masters does and what I'm doing on my own classes is that I'm personally going over the drawings. Okay, New Masters, you're getting the lecture, you got the manual, which is showing you. That's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, and I've taught your class for New Masters, and now Michael Siegel is doing it. This is all with Glenn's blessing, obviously. And really, I see this approach that you teach, Glenn, not only like people like me and Michael are going to continue teaching this, but I'm sure that our students are going to go on to teach this, and their students are going to go on to teach this. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for passing on this knowledge to the next generations.
It's sort of like I joke all the time. Maybe it's not so joking. I'm really a preacher for drawing.
Yeah.
And if
you're a draw evangelist.
Well, I keep talking about maybe we should start this religion of drawings.
You heard it here, everybody. We're starting a Vilppu cult right now on YouTube. Smash the subscribe button.
Well, I'm the first one to sort of say it's not mine. It's not my method. Yeah. It's just tradition. It really is traditional drawing.
Yeah, I have to keep that in mind when people teach your method without crediting you, and they publish a book and they make a course, and those get really popular. Sometimes I get protective and I just get angry, that, these people are ripping off Glenn in plain sight. But that's what I try to remember is that, drawing, none of us own the approach. None of us own the techniques. We're sort of all just here temporarily passing it on. Is that how you feel about it, Glenn?
Yeah, it's if you look at, say, Guarcino or Tiepolo, Piazzetta, and you have to look at their work, and then look at them with the eyes of my drawing manual, you recognize it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And it's not it's the practicalness is what I'm teaching.
Well, Glenn, too, like when it comes to the old masters.
That's when people say, well, I know I always get a thing of a lot of the illustrators. There's sort of styles of school, like a Fixler or something like that.
Oh, you mean Riley method, yeah.
The main deal is that it's from imagination, and the driving force in the drawing is the feeling.
Yeah.
It's the emotional content that really makes the thing go. You can look at it, it's not static. And people say, well, I get the question, well, how about the balance of the figure? And I say, I don't do that.
Yeah.
Balance is dead. You want to take a move. There's a great Degas quote that it's good to draw what you see, but it's better to draw what you remember. And that way you've got the essence of what you saw, and that frees you from the tyranny of nature.
That's a great way to put it, because a lot of illustration is either traced over photos or really done very observationally, and in a sense, like we're not doing what cameras do here. You are creating a work of art. It doesn't really matter if you were looking at a photo or you were drawing from the model. It's not the model that matters, it's the drawing, right?
That's the only thing that matters. The model is only an excuse, and I have no compulsion about just going on and changing and adjusting and moving it. And I tend to maybe I tend to be a basher of the copier.
Yeah. Do you think it's? Yeah, because I often get in that situation in New Masters where I'm trying to teach students the good stuff, and sometimes the only way to do that is to kind of show them how the other stuff that's popular maybe isn't going to work for what they want. So how do you find that balance of not bashing books or bashing methods, but still,
Well,
being honest and forthright.
my approach to that is, if you show me the photograph, show me your drawing, and I'll show you what you missed.
That's interesting.
And in other words, which is what I do.
Yeah.
I draw from photographs a lot.
Sure.
With the viruses and stuff today, I don't go out. I don't go anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that you have to, you can look at anything any way you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what you're looking at, it's how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the how you look at something that makes the difference. And that's the analytical thinking. That
Yeah.
You're analyzing an action. It's not the object, it's not the subject, it's how you look at it.
Yeah.
And-
Well,
Joshua,
yeah.
I was going to say, people are asking if we can do a Q&A session so that
Yeah.
they can ask some questions for Glenn.
Absolutely. So what's the best way to do this? I have the chat here in front of me. So if, should they just ask questions in the chat and I'll just ask them to Glenn, or if it's something on the book that I can answer, I'll answer?
I think so. I could pass it to you, but if you have the chat, that's
No, I
where
got
we're
the-
going to put the question.
Yeah, I've got the chat. I've got the chats. 80% positive, 20% stop interrupting Glenn. So yeah, go ahead and put your question in the chat, and we'll answer some of them. And Glenn, if you wouldn't mind, just keep going through these
Yeah, I
signatures.
can't.
'cause know
Okay,
we
I
gotta get
can't.
through a lot.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm gonna ask you some questions from the audience, Glenn.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we got a question, Glenn, from Nintendo Quest. How do you tackle thumbnails, Glenn? How do you do thumbnail drawings? Can you hear me, Glenn?
No.
Glenn, we got a question. How do you do thumbnail drawings?
I'm not catching that. My lovely wife is going to translate for me here. What?
Yeah. How do you do thumbnail drawings?
They want to know how you do thumbnail drawings.
How do you do thumbnail drawings?
Well, how do you do it?
Well, usually one of the ways of doing a thumbnail is I usually use like a carpenter's pencil.
Oh, wow.
I can take and do somebody's going to get a book here with a thumbnail drawing.
Nice. I think they're tricking us into
What
doing
you
this.
do is now you have to realize that with a thumbnail sketch, it's the composition. That's the only thing that you're talking about. There's nothing else to think about. It's the composition. So if I've got two figures, and I've got a figure going, and I start thinking, say, well, okay, I've got this figure I just drew here. Well, maybe the idea of the movement here is going over here. And so then I would right away, I would be saying, well, I've got all the way over to the corner over here. What if I put another figure over here going in the opposite direction? Or maybe two people are sitting in a sauna. I've been doing a lot of sauna pictures. Okay.
Finish.
And then you got the one figure here relating here. Now this is a little heavy-handed here for taking and getting it across. So I look at that and I said, well, that doesn't work very well. Maybe with this pencil I have to do a little bit larger. And I could say maybe if I've got that figure going like this, and it's really moving over, and I'm talking about the lines going this way, maybe she's taking and coming up and got to put the leg over here, and we've got the washing herself, and she's turned looking in that direction, and then the other figure is way over here, and maybe, so I want to get you across the whole page from here to there. Then I'll throw this, make the eyes go over here, and this figure is sitting on the bench on a second layer level, and I'd be coming through and thinking in here. And if maybe I got through it there, maybe make a transition, maybe have another figure here. Well, you can see what I'm doing is all I'm doing is talking about how to organize your eye moving through the, because what you have is you have the boundaries of the frame. That's your playground. And so then you have to work and say, well, I'm going to make the eye go over here. I'm going to get a transition moving from that to this. And maybe I'm going to take and throw in a vertical in here because that makes this shape go stronger that way. And we get the pull. Anyway, that's how you do a thumbnail.
Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. I got another question. Thank you, Glenn. I got another question for you. This is less technique and more philosophical maybe, but Lucas is asking, how do you reduce the fear of failure? How do you reduce the fear?
Just realize that there is no failure to start with. In other words, when you're doing a drawing, if you approach everything that you do is studying. Now, that's one of the points I try to get across to people, is that when I'm taking, who's that funny guy? I was looking at this here. All right, I always think my smiles are sort of fun. Silly.
Yeah, thank you, Eleanor, because this was COVID, so we couldn't actually get face-to-face with Glenn for the photo. So special thank you to Eleanor Vilppu, Glenn's amazing wife, who is also a better draft person than anybody realizes for doing that photo.
I would be doing nothing with period if it wasn't for her.
Oh, of course.
We're a team, absolute team.
And this,
So,
your team actually introduced me to my wife, Johanna. So I just want to say from this team to your team, thank you so much for that. We really love you guys and appreciate it.
Yeah, I look at this book as a founder's fee.
Damn, that's an expensive fee, man. That's an expensive finder's fee.
See, when I'm doing this, the rhythm, you can see the eye is moving. I make the eye come through here, and I was just composing. If I'm doing this, well, maybe we're going to have a child down here, and we're going to take him lifting up. And so the action that you're seeing, you're seeing the action that's actually taking, maybe picking the child up, and the child's got its leg going up. Well, you're seeing the essence of the action. With no detail, there's no anatomy. It's all
there's no perspective. There's no perspective.
What?
No perspective either.
No, none. Well, it's doing it at eye level. In other words, if you take and that is one of the things that I do consider in the first starting out when you're doing a drawing. If it's for your own composition, is to take and what's the point of view? Yeah. Are we looking down? We're looking up. Is the figure a strong foreshortened figure? Even that dot there, well, that, you know, the minute I put that dot there, you know it's the top of the head. Yeah. That's Michelangelo.
Yeah, and Tiepolo.
Okay, put the nose there, you know exactly, you got the ear. I'm just giving information. So then if I'm taking and drawing something really foreshortened, well, now I'm taking, instead of doing it in rhythmical lines, I'm using simple volumes, show overlapping. Now I'm coming in the leg. So the figure you're leaning over. And we can do another thing here with, okay, picking up a kid again. You don't know if it's the right angle or the right anything until you put it down. And so that's where the thinking comes in, is you put it down so that you can find it. You can correct it, you can change it, you can do anything you want to it. So that don't think that you're trying to do a perfect drawing. That's deadly.
Yeah.
Just approach every drawing as if you were studying. And that's
So-
where I say, and when I'm doing a little bit more careful drawings, I'm constantly taking and calling out, look at those funny feet. Okay, add a couple toes maybe. Still doesn't work. Okay.
I think it works, Glenn. Glenn, I got a question for you that's a little off topic, but I mean, hey, this could be something people are watching many years from now. So I want to ask, do you know about the AI, artificial intelligence?
The what?
Art? Do you know about AI art that's being made? Artificial intelligence artwork?
No, I didn't. I know, of course, I know about artificial intelligence.
But the artwork, have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen. I understand that they're making pictures just by a verbal description.
Exactly, yeah. Somebody types in a verbal description. The software is trained on a huge amount of real human artwork, and then it sort of like spits out an image that looks weird, you know, at least currently. But what do you think of that idea of computers making art? Does that excite you, or is it like missing the point? What do you think?
Well, to me, the point is to make something, to do it yourself. It's your expression, not the object in the end. Yeah. And it's like, okay, you can have an elephant doing drawings. Great. Yeah. It might really look cool. But I'm not an elephant.
Perfect.
Yeah. I don't, I look at it and say, yeah, okay, if you've got a lot of money and you want to spend $1 million on a drawing that's done by an elephant, fine.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it's difficult for people to understand is that I really don't exhibit. I haven't got paintings out there. And to me, well, I have in the past.
Glenn, you've had like 100 one-man shows. What are you talking about?
Well, not 100, but anyway, I've had a lot of shows. Okay, what I've really come down to is, and I used to tell people this, you do not know me until you've seen my drawings. Okay, my drawings is my art. Today, like me sitting down and signing a book, and you watching me, my hand moving as I'm doing it, that is my art. And it's like watching a film, and in fact, it is being filmed. So this film is me and my art and my discussion about how I do it. That's my art. Mm-hmm. And that is really so much of the process. Here, like I was talking about drawing from imagination. Well, here, this is remembering images. Well, this is my grandson, Alfred.
Adorable.
Except he would be sort of looking over here. Drawing. Draw from memory, the essence.
I got another question for you, Glenn. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Okay. This question taps into a kind of a big conversation right now in the art world. I don't know if you've been part of this conversation, which is some people say they are unable to draw from imagination. They can't visualize it. There's even a word for it now. This isn't scientific, but it's called aphantasia. And I know Glenn Keane has commented on it. The Drawbox creator, Urshad, has commented on it. It's kind of like a real topic right now. Do you think that some people can draw from imagination and some people can't, like a disability?
No, I don't think they can't. It's the process. Like Da Vinci says, to take and draw from watermarks on the wall. In fact, there was some marks on my bathroom wall or floor in the studio, and I said, I gotta go in there and I gotta take and do some drawings from this because it's so cool. And a drawing from the clouds, When we're walking, Eleanor and I are walking down the street, we go to, you see the knots on a tree. You can see the face is in these knots. Okay, so the idea that you have to use your imagination. You have it. It's to think that you have something completely finished in your head and you're going to put it down. I can't do that.
Okay, so if you can look at clouds in the sky and you see wolves and race cars and faces, that's pretty much the skill. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you have to start. You have to be able to look at something and to start. It's like taking a psychological Warsaw test. You see things in it.
Yeah.
And it's bringing out your personality.
Yeah, dude, even Charles Manson could see things in the Rorschach test.
Talk about your thing of just putting down a line and then.
Oh, this is,
yeah.
I'll do it right here in the book.
Yeah, please.
Okay. In other words, I often, this white is sort of weird.
If anybody can pull it off, Glenn, I think it's you.
Well, I can. It doesn't have to be white. I can do over even here. Okay. In other words, I'll start out with just. Oh, this paper doesn't work very well.
Yeah, this is way more than
somebody's
5.
going to get a book with my fancy pen. Oh, you got another pen here.
Caleb, keep all the ones with drawings for my personal friends.
Okay,
Don't give
this
to
will do it.
students.
In other words, often I'll start out with just a series of. No, I have nothing in mind from starting out.
It's true, Rick.
Okay, so now I take them from that and I say, well, looks like I'm into kids here. See, I'm getting a cue from the thing that I'm doing here. And now you can see that I'm just using these simple volumes. There's nothing complicated about this. This is really like cartooning now. See, cartooning is you're going to the essence of things. And this is figure, maybe I'd think of that as a leg. And I was doing some drawings the other day of a soccer game. And it was hard to draw from soccer and watch the game at the same time because they were moving all over the place.
Well, yeah.
So you can see this is nothing more than in the drawing manual, taking and doing. Now, here's a point. This is a student thing that I learned. He said, when you're drawing a sphere, you think about the center of the form. That's always the center. And when you draw a fragment of something, you draw it as if you could see the whole thing. So somebody's getting a lesson here, and this is sort of an awkward pose. I've lost the pelvis there. And I come back in, and I can start to pick out a little bit more anatomy. And coming in, but you notice that real awkward thing here. So obviously he must be hitting a soccer ball or something. It's off balance. It makes him look like he's sitting. Okay. And you just the suggestion. It's suggestion. See, that's why. In drawing, I went into animation. Is when I went into animation, how I could take and do cartooning. Not that I knew anything about cartooning.
No, you just scrolled into Disney.
Yeah, and it was fun. I learned that I'm having sort of a knack for this stuff, and I have this sort of the characters, and it was fun. I actually had a lot of fun in animation. And
do you think that traditional 2D animation is similar to traditional, like Renaissance, for example, drawing?
Yeah, this is a point that people don't realized that the people that started in animation, they didn't study animation. They took and studied art. Some of the top people, they had no idea about going into animation. That was a job.
Yeah.
They could take and put food on the table. They had nothing to do with they didn't know anything about animation. They knew nothing, but they used the skills that they had achieved as artists. My biggest thing for the gesture was fashion drawing. And learning fashion drawing to taking and here through. There's other aspects of like the idea of fashion drawing is that, although this is not a fashion drawing here, although I could, the proportions of a fashion drawing are, you use proportions to create a feeling. And so here, let's take and really throwing that hip out. Let's go this way. One of the instructors I had was a really, which I hadn't mentioned, and I actually took over his classes when he retired, was John Legata. First illustrator to make $1 million. But his approach was a very clear-cut construction type of drawing. And we had to do a construction very clearly for when we were taking and before we could even paint. So,
Glenn, when you started teaching and when you started gaining prominence as a thought leader, educator, artist, what was, because that was a long time ago, right? Everything has changed, or a lot of things have changed. At the time you were doing it, what made your approach different than your contemporaries, in your opinion?
well,
What was different about it?
Remember that when I first started going, that drawing was out. Most of the people were taking, and anybody that did figurative work at all was considered an illustrator.
Interesting.
Okay, because we were talking
if
about
they weren't doing modern
non-objective
contemporary.
art, abstract art, total abstract art. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I still deal with that, and well, let's see here. Like this is I'll give you an example of fashion drawing type thing.
Please.
One of the things that would take, and this is always surprising to people, is that I start with the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Straight.
Yeah.
Now here, I'll do this.
Yeah. That reminds me of Mark Westermo a little bit, just going top to bottom.
Yeah, and that's an illustrator. But what you have to deal with is that you have to, in your mind, have a clear sense of the relationship of forms. In other words, I'm drawing his head, but if there's no construction, there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. So I can come through and I can skip around and I can take and come off.
And you draw like this sometimes, right? This isn't just a demo. Sometimes you just draw directly.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So you can come through and I can take them through and I say, it's one of the artists people are always surprised when I take and say whose work I really like is, what's his name now?
I'll Google it.
He's a Pfeiffer, the Jules Pfeiffer.
Okay.
And they're taking like this figure here now. Okay. Now if I take and bring some emotion to this, I can take and just suggesting the hand coming up here and doing this. Coming down. Now, this is no different than you start thinking of the artists, Matisse or anybody. You just come down and putting a line, except there Matisse would be taking and designing the relationship of the lines more. I'm just taking and sort of sketching here. Now, see, when I put the hands on the hip, now there's an attitude to the drawing, though, even the way it's turned. See, there's an emotional content to that drawing. And you can feel the flow, you can feel the action, there's no construction. Really, the anatomy is in my head.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling the flow of the thing. Now you look at that and say, well, gee, is that Vilppuism? That's not Vilppuism. just drawing. And
being able to draw in different styles is something that I think we try to teach students, and I know that that's very much your mantra. But if you can draw well, you can adopt any style. It doesn't matter if it's manga or Western comic book superheroes. You can draw anything if you can draw well. Do you agree with that, Glenn?
Yeah, the style is and one of the difference between a illustrator and a fine art is that the illustrator will take and consciously try to develop a style, where in the fine arts, the style is just your personality.
That's interesting.
It's not a construct, it's just the way you do things.
Yeah.
That's why
in entertainment, you have to adopt different styles depending on the show you're working on, right? You have to change your style. If you're in animation, for example, right?
I didn't really change. The subject changed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the way I draw Renaissance stuff is like here. Like for instance, I'm just going to draw it here. We can take this is an example of talking about how the content, the emotional content is the thing. So that we get this here. We see the very few lines.
Can I ask you another question while you do that drawing, Glenn?
Okay, but look at that now. When you look at this figure here, sure, go ahead.
Oh, so Citizen of the World asks, how do you handle self-doubt and the feeling that you might actually be getting worse? So how do you motivate yourself when you're not feeling confident about your drawing, in other words?
You never get over it.
Oh, wow.
Okay, see here, you look at that, you can see this figure here, now there's an attitude to that figure. You don't know, guy, gal. Now look at the difference.
Yeah. Glenn, I want to give a special thank you to some of the people who wrote testimonials for you. Do you mind if I read a couple of these out loud?
Sure, let me sign this thing here.
So Glenn, oh, go ahead.
You notice to look at this thing, but the emotional content between these things is totally different, and there's nothing there, but just the organization of the lines that create a feeling. That's what it is. It's all emotion.
Let me, I'm just going to read a couple of these. So Drew Struzan, who's a legendary movie poster illustrator, did Star Wars, Harry Potter, Blade Runner, Indiana Jones. Drew wrote a testimonial for your book. He was a student of yours, and he said that quality education.
But Drew. I remember as a student, he was applying for a master's program at Art Center, and I was his advisor.
Yeah.
And besides, he took him being in my drawing classes and stuff. And he was super, super neat guy. But anyway, the quality education is the cornerstone. The better you can draw, the better you communicate visual ideas. Glenn Vilppu takes you there in the drawing manual. He illuminates the path to mastery.
Hashtag Path to Mastery.
Right.
We also got Stan Prokopenko. We're
Yes,
big fans of
Stan was actually a student of mine at the Animation Guild.
Oh, really? Stan told me that he studied you through your book. I didn't know that he ever went
Yeah,
to
no,
class.
he had also done personally. And the book, most of the time, I think he took one class direct from me. I may be wrong there.
Stan studied at Watts Atelier, so he's getting Fred Fixler, Mark Westermo, Jeff Watts. He's getting that education, and then he combined it with you and Steve Houston, who are more constructive. Do you remember what it was like having Stan in class? I'm curious.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember.
Love you, Stan. Love you.
I just remember he came up and did an interview with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember him as being, gee, a really nice guy, and he was really interested. I have no idea. Of course, I've seen some of his examples and stuff.
Oh,
and I
dude,
said,
he's the king of YouTube. We're not even making a dent on the street.
yeah. Well, I look at it and said, he's obviously studied with Vilppu.
yeah. You can totally see it, and also like when he's teaching things like the Robo Beam, for example, like that's his version of teaching, what you taught, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's.
So we also have Juliet Aristides, who was an amazing publisher on the realist side. She was nice enough to do a testimonial here. Would you mind reading those, Glenn?
The who?
Juliet Aristides, the next one.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was really surprised when she asked me to submit a drawing for her book.
Yeah.
I thought, they're letting the fox into the hen house.
That's so funny. I also have drawings in that book too, Glenn. But Juliet, even though she's coming from a realist academic side, which is sort of a little bit different than where we're coming from, I think any artist recognizes mastery, even when it's not their method in their wheelhouse. And so it makes total sense that she would have you for that book.
No,
Awesome
I agree with you there completely, because I have good friends who are hardcore academy people who are good artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you look at the work and you say, gee.
Yeah, Stephen
say,
Bauman, Colleen Berry, Cesar Santos. There's a lot of like academic realists who are also amazing artists.
Yeah, and when people ask me, he says, well, what do you think of Picasso compared to, say, this person or that person? I said, Picasso does the best Picassos I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But again, if you don't understand what they're doing, you can't appreciate it.
Yeah.
And that's you have to try to understand what the point of view. Like I have a very good friend of mine who's got paintings in the Vatican. Okay?
Yeah.
And
the bathroom walls, but yeah.
Yeah, we went to a gallery here in Los Angeles or in Pasadena together, and he started talking about painting and his perception of the paint, of the quality, the texture of the surface and stuff, was way different than my way of seeing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was taking and coming from a very, very different place.
Yeah.
And yet he's taking classes from me, that type of thing. So
yeah, I mean, it seems like everybody in entertainment. Before I met you and you became my mentor and we became very close, when I was just hearing about you, my memory of this, so this is like 15 years ago, everybody would say that you were the best at figure drawing and the theory and just drawing from imagination. You had this reputation that was not just in animation, because I wasn't coming at it from the animation side. That was the reputation that you had earned before I even knew who you were. So it was this idea that the quality will rise to the top, even if the book is self-published, even if you're just going to the liquor store and printing off worksheets, the cream does rise to the top. And in that way, it's a really amazing story because, you know, you were self-publishing everything, right? The Vilppu store, Vilppu, this is all your business. You're an entrepreneur.
One of the inspirations for that was Bridgman.
Yeah.
Bridgman was self-publishing.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, we actually, Ulas and I, the designer and I, we both have thousands of art books just like you. We're fans of art books. And when we did this, when we had this idea for these iconic little figures, we were sort of thinking of Bridgman's self-published books, the original first editions. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they had a similar kind of high quality presentation way before the Dover books, way before that. So there's a little bit of Bridgman inspiration in the design as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because he was, but one of the things, again, Bridgman, he was just taking and communicating in his way. Cambiaso, Michelangelo, the construction, the being able to see form. And
you know, and also Bridgman was just a teacher, right? He didn't have finished art. He wasn't doing shows. He wasn't working in. So you actually, one distinction that I talk about between you and Bridgman is that you are a fine artist and a storyboard, background artist, animator, comic artist. You actually did these things and not just teaching. Is there a difference, do you think, between people who are really good at teaching and people who are good at teaching and then also have professional careers, or does it not matter?
Well, it's the biggest advantage I have is now as a teacher, having had worked in the industry, is that I understand the need for different things, what you have to know, the relative importance of things. And that is you can't come to that from just a theoretical point of view.
Yeah.
You can't just take and read a book on animation and then be teaching in a university or something and communicate. You have to actually be able to do it.
Well, at least at Art Center and Cal Arts and these kinds of schools, there was nobody there who wasn't a professional, right? Like that was the normal thing.
It's like, okay, I was the head of the drawing department or the animation, character animation department of Cal Arts for a few years.
Baller.
Okay, and I brought why I was there. Well, because I had worked at Disney, I could draw, and I brought drawing to them, and so. But I also was teaching layout. I didn't teach storyboard, which I have fun doing. I love doing storyboards. It was one of the best things I did. But anyway, so it's drawing.
Yeah, you know, I think I got that. I think I learned that from you, Glenn. Which New Masters Academy relies on this idea that drawing foundations are the most important part, and everything else is just domain-specific stuff you can learn. And I'm assuming that I learned that from you, just because you're so versatile and you could get into Disney animation in your 40s without any background, or you can do comics, you can do background art, you can do all of these different things, including fine art, which was your primary thing. That taught me how important drawing foundations are. And in all my experience and my life since then has just been sort of reaffirming that. But I want to thank you because, you know, we worked together on Vilppu Academy, but without Glenn Vilppu, there is no New Masters Academy, because New Masters Academy started with like me and Glenn at my house sketching out an outline for what a great, an ideal, affordable education would look like. And so I don't know if people know this, but without Glenn, there is no New Masters. And I just want to say that on camera as publicly as possible. And I want to thank you for that. And I'm sure all of us here would, a lot of these people are New Master students.
Well, you know, I have to thank you too, Joshua, because what helped, of course, you helped me with the Vilppu Academy,
Yeah.
but beyond that, you created the opportunity for people to take and really experience top talent.
The good stuff.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the top talent, and that's one of the things I'm always joking about, the fact that, okay, I sit here and I'm drawing and I'm doing these, and I started out with Xerox machines and everything else. And we've always had sort of a little bit of an argument. You're always saying, but it has to be perfect lighting, it has to be perfect this, and perfect that. And I would say, yeah. It's what the content that counts is most.
Yeah. Yeah, it's,
And-
you're definitely more punk rock, and I'm a little more classical music when it comes to production, I think. But I think that combination works really well together, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the patience, the time to take and do what you do
Yeah.
with all this technology stuff. Like, okay, what we're doing online right now.
Yeah.
Okay, I do stuff online, but I do not have 5 cameras shining down on me with the whole thing.
But you know what's funny, Glenn, is when we were doing Vilppu Academy and New Masters Academy, I mean, New Masters Academy was the first subscription art website in the world. Vilppu Academy was one of the first online only art schools with anybody of your level. And I think that when we were doing it, I remember we were constantly having to convince people that this was a legitimate way to learn. And now, especially post-COVID, every single art teacher has got a Patreon or a Gumroad, or they're on YouTube. And so it's kind of funny that change, that now that's the norm, right?
Yeah.
And at that time it wasn't.
It's called competition.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I do, I don't know anybody who's doing it. Maybe you're doing it in a studio situation with New Masters. But when I'm taking a class on site, I'm drawing on my iPad, or if I'm not drawing on my iPad, I'm drawing on paper with a camera over me, projecting onto a monitor
Yeah.
and recording.
Yeah, and you know what, Glenn? Like, have you ever tried to look up historical footage of Monet or whoever, and there's only like 20 seconds, and it's such low quality? And I always felt that, like, the masters of today, we need to capture what they're doing. It's so important for future generations, not just for today's animators or today art students, but for somebody in 150 years who wants to learn this traditional craft that maybe doesn't exist in that form anymore. So I think it's important for artists throughout history that we do this.
Yeah, it's like I'm literally, what I'm doing with New Masters, what I'm doing for myself, I am recording about 12 hours a week.
Oh my God. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's a lot of Vilppu.
I mean, okay, I don't know anybody that's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am
So
following
I
your
wanted
footsteps.
to-
I am recording my carving and time-lapsing them every day. Yeah, Caleb, are we out of time here?
So yeah, we're wanting to open up the book for purchase in 5 minutes here.
Okay.
So I think that should mark probably the end of what we're doing here, because I'm sure people are going to want to run and purchase this book. It's absolutely
depends.
amazing. This conversation, people have loved it. They've loved hearing from Glenn. They've loved seeing the book for the first time. And they loved how many of these are getting drawn in.
Oh yeah, Glenn, we were going to do 5. I think you did more than 5 drawings.
What's that?
I think you did more than 5 drawings for people.
Yeah, I guess I did a little. Well, that's what I do. I'm a drawer. I draw pretty much all the time. I'm filling up sketchbooks constantly.
Yeah.
And these are, with the white pencil, it's a sort of a different thing. I don't normally do this, but, and I even put in this I'm being sort of drawing a nude without showing too much.
I've seen a lot of people draw in books that they're selling at like CTN or Comic-Con or whatever. One thing I noticed when people usually do that is they do the same pose again and again and again, just hundreds and thousands of times, and they'll just change like goggles or glasses. But when Glenn draws from imagination, you're taking risks. You're actually like, you don't know what you're going to draw, and you're doing it right in front of the world, and that doesn't bother you.
Absolutely. I had no idea. I started out here with an eye and kept adding. I'm going to throw her shoulder back here and throw an arm out here on the hip, I guess.
Joshua, any last comments? We've heard it a few times about the content differences on the new version.
Okay, so the original versions of this were self-published. So there are just things about self-publishing versus publishing it with a team, like copy editing by different people going over it, 6 rounds of proofing, brand new design, table of contents.
Okay.
This is a hardback book. This is a high quality book. We probably could have charged over $100 for it, but we just wanted people to actually be able to get it. But we didn't spare any expense here. You know, it's Smythe sewn, it's thick, high quality paper. It's the best German offset printers. It's this custom cloth, you know what I mean? And custom dye, silver embossing. You know, this is a French style jacket. Every one of these little options costs more money and cuts into our profit. And in a situation where all of the how to draw books that are getting made are just cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, Chinese, soft cover, glued, they're coming apart. I wanted to do something. If this is the only book that we ever publish, I want to do it right. And so this is definitely like a premium thing. There's also digital content that you get access to. If you're already a New Masters subscriber, this is probably a little less relevant because you have access to this kind of stuff in New Masters. But if you're not a New Masters subscriber, you're getting digital content as well. You know, this book is the gold standard book for figure drawing, gesture drawing. So the book as itself is already the best book of its kind. We are just bringing the presentation, bringing the quality, making sort of that 10% little adjustments to just sort of do it justice. But this is the Vilppu Manual. So this is the same content that Glenn was teaching when he originally was designing this book 30 years ago. It's just in sort of the best version that it can be in, which is this. That's the idea here. So I don't really care if we lose money or make money on this. I just want to get that out there. Because it's only 2,000 copies, the resale value is going to be really good, especially since Glenn's signing just 200. Some of them have drawings. So even just as a collectible edition, this is something that, you know, I want this to be something that you want to put on your bookshelf, and it's a book that's going to last your lifetime. I didn't want something that's going to come apart.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's just that, the quality and the design.
Don't keep it on the shelf.
Yeah.
It's literally a drawing manual.
Yeah. Glenn, I had one more question. I don't know if we have to go, but Glenn, somebody asked, how do you use the drawing manual? Do you go chapter by chapter? Do you copy the drawings? How?
Absolutely, chapter by chapter. That's what it's meant. It's meant to be an actual manual. And it's so much harder if you try to jump ahead. And first, maybe if you've had a lot of experience, you'll go through and you want to get into doing the tone and stuff, you know, but that just makes it harder.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make one comment. One of the reasons that I did it myself originally, and why I am so happy that you're doing it, is that I didn't want somebody to go to some of the book companies. They want to tell you how to take and do what you do, which they do not know anything about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
and also, like Glenn, most New Masters teachers have books, and so I always ask them about their contracts with the publishers, and I've only ever heard negative things, that the publisher doesn't promote it, or they don't do what they promised, or they only earn less than $1 per book. So I think the business side of book publishing is a little bit screwed up for creators. And so I also wanted to do it more fairly than what I hear from my colleagues.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I have people coming up to me like at CTN and say, "Gee, you're famous in China." Yeah. And people are seeing. I had a student in a class just last year, and she said, I mentioned that, and she was a Chinese student. She says, "Oh yeah, that's where I saw your stuff." And
Yeah,
that it was
yeah.
my videos with Chinese
Yeah.
subtitles.
There's New Masters Academy in China, and it has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
It's literally government level piracy. It's crazy, but I'm glad those Chinese students are getting access to the information. But yeah,
Yeah, this is great. I'm enjoying it. I guess I did do more than 5 here, didn't I?
yeah, that's the thing with Glenn. Glenn's just gonna draw. Drawer's gonna draw.
So we just opened it up for people. So
Okay.
people are going to start going to purchase it. If there's any last thoughts here from Glenn or you, Joshua, I thank you so much for taking all this time. And this
Yeah.
conversation has been amazing. It's been such a wonderful treat hearing what you had to say, Glenn. Is there anything else that you guys would like to
Well,
say right
thank you,
before we
Caleb.
end this?
Yeah, I mean, I want to tell Glenn just thank you for trusting me and trusting New Masters Academy to collaborate with you over the years, trusting us to make this book because you've never trusted any publisher, and there's way bigger publishers. This is our first book. We don't know what we're doing. I feel like we nailed it, but just that trust and that is huge. So thank you for allowing New Masters Academy to do this book the way that we think it should be done. We really appreciate
I
it.
thank you.
And thanks
I
for
really
everybody
do.
joining us on the stream. And yeah, the book is now available to purchase. If you've got questions, hit us up. A lot of billing questions or shipping questions come up. We want to get this to you. So if you don't see your country listed, just email us. Email us through the contact form, info@nma.art. We want to get this book in your hands. Thank you so much, Glenn, for risking COVID and coming down to the studio. Obviously, we took a lot of safety precautions. I know you don't leave the house much for safety reasons. I really appreciate you
This is
doing
literally, this is the only time I have gone anywhere except when I had to, go to the doctors and stuff. I don't do it.
Somebody get him a taco or something. Get this man
In
a burrito.
in a driving rain besides.
Yeah. Oh, is it raining?
Yeah, it's like, the rain the whole time down here.
I actually miss California, seeing you there in the studio. It's giving me a lot of nostalgia. Well, anyway, thank you so much. Glenn, Eleanor, thank you. I love you guys, of course. I'm really proud and really excited. We're not going to be profiting a lot on this book, but I don't care. I'm just real happy to just that we did this properly, and I want to promote it, unashamedly. So I'm going to keep talking this up. Anyone that's watching this is the best figure drawing book, by far.
It's the only one available now, other than pirated stuff.
Yeah, there is pirated stuff, you guys. Obviously, you got to make your own decisions, but you buy the real book, the real Glenn Vilppu and his family gets real money for this. If you buy the pirated stuff, that's not doing any good, and it's going to be super bad quality. Yeah.
Support me, my grandchildren.
Support all the Vilppus, the intergenerations.
New
of
Masters,
Vilppus.
we got to do it.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so much, everybody.
Well, we really have sort of been although I'm not, quote, a partner, but we have been pretty much partners in the whole process.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what New Masters has done. And it's great. It's the only thing. Yeah.
Buy the book, everybody. Buy the book. At the very least, if you're not sure, you can probably sell it on eBay later. Don't worry, we're not going to allow scalpers. We're not going to allow anyone to order them all. That question keeps coming up. Get this book. There's no way you'll regret it. If you buy this book and you don't learn something, I would be shocked. I'd be shocked. This is really the one. I've been recommending this before I even knew who Glenn was personally. So this is it.
I get messages continually from people thanking me for their career and what they learned from the drawing manual.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks again to everyone, and have
Bye-bye,
a good
Glenn.
rest of your Sunday. Be
Yes.
safe.
Yeah.